Hello, my name is Mark Greene. I'm the Mission Champion at the London Institute for Contemporary Christianity. Welcome to the TGIM Thank God It's Monday podcast, where we explore how Jesus works in and through his people in a whole variety of jobs and sectors. In this episode, the pearls of wisdom and the diamonds of insight will be coming from two people who have been in the rescue business for some time. Jon Templeman, who is the chairman of Whittan Storage Systems, who's made a career of rescuing ailing and failing companies. And Micah Wright, who's 8 years into a career in a restructuring consultancy. As you might imagine, looking at businesses which are under pressure and with people under pressure, one of our themes will be resilience and the other one will be building trust. As ever, shalom and welcome to you both. As you know, in this podcast, this is the podcast where you get to ask each other questions. But hold your inner Paxman for a moment. Let me kick off, if I may. Micah, you're a senior associate in a restructuring consultancy.
I am indeed.
What does that mean? What do you do?
So essentially, we're advising companies and banks often on banks will make loans to companies, and those companies often find themselves in distress. So we give them the options of what they need to do. So it could be a sale of a business. It could be that they sort of restructure or sell certain parts of the business off. They might have a turnaround in fortunes that the bank needs to assess. So there's loads of different things that might happen, or sadly, they might just formally go into insolvency processes. So there's different things that can, or forms that can take in terms of our advice.
Mm-hmm. And what do you like about it?
So I think it's, what I do now is, obviously there's a consultancy aspect to it, but it's got quite good sort of technical underpinnings. So you need to know how to navigate through sort of insolvency regulation and law. You have to deal with people, and often people who are... Yeah, which is an unfamiliar feature of a lot of people's work. But yeah, people sometimes at their worst or under a lot of stress. So the ability to be able to speak into that situation and have an impact on them personally is quite important too.
Any joy in that for you?
Personally, yes. The ability to actually say something and it be taken on is really important. I think often people end up, there might be an investment proposal or a project, and you have to write a big report on what it is, and you don't know whether it's just going to land on someone's desk and not be read forever. Whilst in this, action has to be taken. So you really feel like you make a difference and that what you're doing is important. So I think that it has got some merits.
Well, I wasn't saying it didn't have any merits, don't get me wrong. I was just interested in what you were enjoying. Clearly, rescuing companies is not a bad thing to do. So there's a joy in just, what I'm hearing is there's just a joy in, actually, this work is going somewhere.
Yes, yeah.
And in terms of satisfaction from that, I mean, have you had some moments when you thought, well done, good and faithful Micah?
Yeah, they're often balanced out by dissatisfaction or things that go well.
Okay.
I mean, yeah. The reason that we're involved is because things aren't going well, and they often tend to it not being the result that everyone would like. But when you can get it right, and when things are sort of salvageable, then yes, I mean jobs are rescued, and directors are in a better position. Banks feel like they can get sort of out, or their exposure is limited. So yeah, there's good things there as well.
Well, we'll probably dive down a bit deeper into some of those things in a moment. But talking about salvageable and helping people out, Jon, just give us a snapshot of your career.
So when I left university, I trained as an accountant with Deloitte's that became Coopers & Lybrand, that became PwC. Very much convicted that I wanted to be a Christian in business, and that's a conviction that's only grown over time. I stayed there for about 16 years in the end. Right. Had a great time jetting all around the world, particularly in North America, but also quite a bit to Europe. I was in a different area to Micah, doing mainly transaction support work. Then I went off to join a group called Charter, which was a group in a lot of trouble. And in fact, we were dealing with people like Micah's predecessors, who we viewed as the enemy, funnily enough. and I was just asked by the chairman to come and help him do a review of what was going on. New chairman, great guy called David Gawler, and basically I spent the next 3 or 4 months just being his bag carrier, going around the world, learning a lot about wines of the world, but also learning from a great turnaround specialist. I then took over as CFO of the main operating business of the group, a business called ESAB. I spent a year out in Sweden, in Gothenburg, lovely place. I ate lots of herring.
The wine isn't so good in Sweden, though, is it?
No, it's expensive. Basically doing fundamental turnaround stuff. So cash management, reducing working capital, restructuring type deal. And then I sort of fell into being a CEO, if I'm honest, in a Lebanese restaurant, 9 o'clock one night. David Gawler just said, well, JT, you're the only person I trust. How about taking on being CEO of ESAB, this quite large welding business? So I said yes. We did a rescue rights issue, got people like Micah off our back, and then
is this triggering you? Him being here this morning? Is this going to be okay?
I thought we were meant to be friends.
He's a big bloke as well, isn't he?
And then I've spent over 20 years basically running manufacturing businesses that start off with problems, but then I, with the help of my teams, etc., have been able to stabilise and turn into fast-growing businesses. And I've just moved on to take over as chairman of the group, which I was running as CEO.
Now, obviously, I don't know the inside of these businesses, but the sort of word on the street is that being a CEO in manufacturing is pretty brutal, and being a CEO in manufacturing business that's kind of in trouble is probably even more brutal. True? Is that true?
Yeah, I'd say it's pretty true.
Glutton for punishment.
Being a CEO in itself, in whatever context, is actually quite hard for 2 reasons. One, because you're always on show, and that's particularly hard for a Christian. The good thing is you get to set the tone from the top, but the disadvantage is you can never drop your guard. And I'm not a perfect person, this may come as a shock, but I get things wrong, and you're immediately held to account. Secondly, it's a pretty lonely place to be. Yes, hopefully you have a supportive chairman, and gradually you mould your own team. But when it comes down to it, strategy, governance, talent management, customer relationships, ultimately the buck stops with me. So it can be pretty hard, and that's why a support network outside is important. Manufacturing itself is a difficult area to be, particularly in the UK. Without being overly political about it, there's been no effective industrial strategy for as long as I can remember. So a lot of companies in this country are underinvested, both in terms of people as well as machinery and automation. And it's been a fairly tough place to be because you haven't got the breaks that other industries, tax breaks, incentives, that other industries have enjoyed. So it's been a challenging ride, but very fulfilling for a lot of the same reasons that Micah pointed out.
Yeah. So what makes for a good CEO in this? What do you think you really need as a CEO, but as a Christian CEO in this kind of context for success?
Well, there are some obvious things like, you need intellectually to be able to deal with a wide range of complex issues, deal with them all at once and prioritise. But the bigger qualities, I would say, are, you mentioned resilience to start with. If you work in turnaround, there are going to be situations where the business is in crisis, where there are really tough, pressurised situations, and you've got to be able to get through that. And that's particular for me. That's where God has come in to a lot of what I've done. Just being able to pray, go back and talk to my family, talk to friends, and actually think there is something outside of this very difficult situation. Other things that are key: honesty. You've got to tell people as it is. yes, you can craft a message, but ultimately they've got to understand what the problems are and what you intend to do about them. So you've got to give them some hope as well. And then following on from that is integrity. If you say you're going to do something, you've got to do it. And don't ask people to do stuff that you wouldn't be prepared to do yourself. I think those are probably the big things that are key.
And I mean, in terms of setting boundaries, and because obviously you said it's quite a lonely road, and it must be quite easy to just get so engrossed in something that that's like the sacrifice of everything else going on in your life. So I guess, how do you set boundaries yourself? And I suppose now that you're, I think, transitioning into like the chairman role, how do you set boundaries for other people if they may not feel able to do that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. For me, it's never been so much of an issue because of the importance to me of my faith and my family. So I've always made sure, or tried to make sure anyway, that I've prayed regularly, that I've not let my reading of the Bible slip. I've had a prayer partner for 15 years who I continue to pray with. I've had good friends, people actually like Mark and a couple of other of my friends who have been useful, helpful people to talk to, who understand my world, but can offer a different perspective and help me maybe to lift my eyes up from the immediate. I think the other thing I always tell myself is that the job's going to end at some point, but my family and faith are, God willing, going to carry on forever. So just making sure that, for example, I was there for all my children's birthdays, for their prize givings or performances in shows. I've got 3.
John has 19 children.
Yeah.
Oh, no, he's got 3 daughters.
I've got three daughters who love to perform, and sometimes they even act.
Very talented.
So, and things like with my wife, making sure that I was there for anniversaries, on holidays, making sure that I was really disciplined about, yes, I'll check my phone a couple of times. It goes with the territory. You can't be out of contact, and deal with urgent emails or take urgent calls, but not as some people do, I know, do 3 or 4 hours of emails on holiday.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, when we were talking, you've also had your challenges of a slightly different nature, but all our challenges are our challenges in your career, 20s. So do you want to say something about how you've navigated those, what some of those have been? And
so I think, like, for me, it's been like quite a weird, difficult start, I suppose, to my career. I think, John, you also did accountancy exams, and I had a really rough time of it, to be honest, and that made things quite difficult, and being in positions where you want to sort of progress and move on, and feeling like, what am I doing potentially here? Like, where am I going? So I think what John was saying, having faith so central to the purpose of you being at work, allows you to see beyond that. And I'm married as well. I've got stuff that is keeping me sort of sane and giving me a drive and a purpose beyond work. And the risk is, I think, if you allow work to overtake your life and it doesn't particularly go well, then what is the reason almost for living? It becomes that stark and almost dark in many ways. So I think for me, that's been the big thing. But I think on the topic of resilience, I've thought quite a few thoughts on what that actually means, and I think it's quite complicated.
do you want to give us some of them, or are you
Yeah,
going to
sure.
withhold that for another podcast?
I don't know whether I want to. I wasn't sure if I was going to start rambling. So I think beforehand, I just used to think that resilience and loyalty, or sort of blind, sort of just keeping on going, were synonymous. So if you had a job that you didn't necessarily enjoy, you would just keep going on with it, even to the detriment of yourself and others. And I think a lot of wisdom's, I don't have a sort of a solution, but I think a lot of wisdom is required, that you might find yourself in a position where it's really, really difficult, but you might see that there are people in that role who God has a plan for, or you can see God working in that, and you think, that helps me kind of stay there. Or the fact that some adversity might generate character in you and you see yourself growing, and that's really important. I know for other people, they might find themselves in positions where they are not able to basically be effective for God, for a variety of reasons. And I think it's trying to distinguish between the two, that there might be some environments where it may not be great, and others that it's not great, but there's a purpose still, and there's something for you to do, and you're able to flourish. And talking to other people, praying a lot about it, reading and understanding what God's will is. I think of Romans 12, about like by testing we may discern what's good, acceptable, and perfect. I think that's just trying to figure things out. It's not always easy and clear cut, and I think we assume that we'll just pray one morning and you'll be told, or a job offer will come through, and that's often not the case. In my opinion.
So, what else has got you through? What else has God provided for you? Obviously, the prayer, the sense of your wife, and the people around you.
Yes, I think that is like the biggest thing. Family, obviously, for those who are fortunate to have really good support networks in that way, are just absolutely crucial. I think myself being honest and sort of being able to articulate exactly how I'm feeling and what I'm going through, because people can't be involved unless they know what's going on and how you're feeling and where you want to go. And for me, like, work is kind of work, and I don't like to talk about it like a great deal. And my wife would be like, "How's your day?" And it would always be fine. I think we all kind of have that, and we
Fine,
think
darling.
you wouldn't ever understand sort of thing, despite her also in full-time work. So I think that's the first thing. Knowing when to ask for help as well. I think it's basically just an issue of pride, that you just don't feel like you should ask for help. And it's actually something that's really important that I needed to do more. And I think the final thing is just like mentorship. So I think in my last job, like having people, despite finding things difficult, having someone like senior who really sees you and invests in you can change the game completely.
Yeah.
And that encouragement, I think actually a lot of people need a lot of encouragement. And it's maybe something I'm worried about with a lot of people working from home, is that you don't necessarily get that sort of face-to-face interaction where people are really invested in you.
And part of it is about learning, isn't it? As you go along, as you experience difficult situations, it's working out what works and what doesn't, but also understanding that you can get through even when it's really tough. You are going to come outside. Are you a reflector? Do you think about what's happened?
I am an over-reflector, probably. I think I have a really bad habit of just tutting through the day because I'm reminded of something that I should have done or didn't do. I do reflect a lot. But yeah, that is a really helpful. And counting your blessings, understanding how God's taken you through certain things as well, and allowing you to almost overlay that onto your current circumstances and say, actually, there is, as Jon was saying, that there is a way forward, but it may not seem or may not be what you most expect it to be, I think is quite a key point.
Yeah, just listening to you, one of the things that strikes me is that word courage, to be honest. I think, we think it's easy to be honest about our emotions. Actually, it's taken me a long time. Sometimes I'd be reflecting on my day and I won't write down what I really felt because I don't want, God knows what I'm thinking. Well, why can't you write it in your journal? Because then these evil thoughts that I've had, they become real. So I'm not really being honest with myself. And I think actually emotional courage, it's one of the things that the Psalms potentially give us. If we say, well, if David can say this, I can say this too, even though I might have to repent immediately afterwards, which I often have to do. Well, it's brilliant, if that doesn't sound patronizing, that you're communing with God so much. Have you, and you're talking to him about it, which obviously it's its own strengthening, isn't it? Just having someone to talk to. But have you actually sort of seen him, if you like, working in and through you? Have you seen some answers to prayer, specific ones? Or how does that?
So I think two things. Firstly, like a specific example, there's been times, I guess, in my career where you've clashed with people people are being quite harsh. Often they're people who are more senior or managing you, and it's really difficult when you have months where you just feel like they're very overly critical, or they're not, that they basically don't like you. And I've had one or two examples of that, and being able to like pray for them as well helps like a great deal. I mean, I had great results after being able to be honest and sort of tell them how I was feeling, and speaking to other people and having them have an input into that as well, and being able to see eye to eye again. I think those have been a massive answer to prayer. And yeah, I have certain people in mind where I'm not best friends with them, but we just work well again, and we understand, and there's that trust, I think, which is there. And understand as well that a lot of the time it's not really that personal. It's just people have other things going on, and trying to understand that and meet them there is really, really important.
Exactly. Yeah.
And this person had, like I said, come in as a partner and had lots of stuff going on with his old work, and certain things around pay, I suppose, and lots of different things like that. And so was really, really stressed about hitting certain sort of targets and doing certain jobs right. And I think understanding that and being able to see it and do something about it, just made a whole world of difference. And the second point, I think, seeing God working through me in my career, it's easy to feel a little bit unaccomplished, I suppose, when you think, oh, I've not really left much of an impact in these places that I've been, and no one's really gotten to know Jesus personally. And I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, I think, in terms of our evangelism in the workplace. Not to say that we shouldn't do it, but to say that God can raise other people up to continue the work that you're doing, and you are a vital but small piece in the broader puzzle, and the broader sort of scheme and journey, and God is at work. And I think that's the pride bit of it. Again, like, you think that you're the only person that is able to do that, and you're the savior for this person, and without you, they're kind of just left alone and nowhere to go.
Yes, when you leave the company, they're all going to be eternally separated from God.
Yeah.
And it's your fault.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can really use it to beat yourself up about it, but it's in God's hands.
Yeah, it's very, very, very wise. Very wise. I mean, there's a sort of, I'm trying to remember being around your age, but it's a different dynamic, isn't it, when you're in your 20s?
Yes.
A lot more people are they're single or they're newly married. There's a slightly different dynamic to all of that. It's a bit more social.
Yes.
How do you sort of think about conversations?
So that is really, really hard. So I think 2 points on that. Firstly, I've already mentioned, but the whole COVID dynamic and work from home, socials are less frequent, I'd say, and being able to have everyone in the office to do something is difficult. When they do happen, then often the conversation is mostly about work, mostly about other people in work, and then a little bit of just joking and whatever. So it's fine. It can be quite fun, but it's very superficial. And to go anywhere below that is almost impossible. So I've found that actually having the ability to go for a drink or a meal with one or two people has been the most fruitful, where we've actually been able to talk about things honestly, and not pretend to be something that we're not. So that would definitely be my advice, is that, being able to speak to people one-on-one, maybe 1 and 2 is the ideal situation.
Yeah.
And it's about showing a different way of doing things, isn't it? Like you, I can count the number of sort of directly evangelistic conversations that I've had over 40 years in the workplace on the fingers of one hand.
Yeah.
But by modelling a new way of being human, a different way, you hope at least you're providing a signpost. I find that particularly important when people are having a really rough time. First of all, however busy you are, the key is to stop and actually listen and work out what's really going on, and take a genuine interest. And it's a bit like the Apostle Peter says, isn't it? When someone asks you a question, answer it with respect and patience. Not necessarily, particularly as a CEO, you can't necessarily, stand up and do a Billy Graham type address and say,
Yeah.
hey, I'm a Christian and you need Jesus Christ, which we all know they do.
Yeah.
But better to try and do it by modelling a different way of being a Christian in business. A favourite writer of mine is Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and when he talks about cheap grace, trying to get away from the idea that it's just an easy believism. It's got to make a difference to actually how you live, however imperfectly, on a day-to-day basis.
Yes.
As you know, John, I've visited two of your sites in two different companies. So
Lucky man.
I'm very lucky. I mean, I was hoping, unfortunately, the samples were just too big for me to get any. But one of the things I noticed is people's posture towards you. And I think one of your gifts as a CEO, really, which is, they used to say was quite rare in British management, was the ability to engage with people from all walks of life, from all backgrounds. British managers tend to be better with managing office workers than they do people who are making things and who are delivering things and so on and so forth. Yeah. Where do you think that's come from for you?
Well, first of all, I'd say that's an absolutely crucial point for a CEO to be able to relate to a whole variety of people. I think partly it comes from my background. So, we were from a poor family. I come from a council house. We didn't have any money. We were patronised and treated fairly rudely, frankly. We would have been called a family on benefits in today's world. And then, I was helped by some very interesting and supportive people who got me going. I think the other thing, because I was short of money, I spent the year between school and university working in a whole variety of jobs, not least a number of factories, which gave me an insight really into how people were treated who were just doing everyday jobs. And I never forgot that. It was probably the best preparation and training I ever did for a CEO. And I think it's particularly important for Christians that, you have to steer clear of any discrimination. You've got to treat everybody with respect and courtesy. And I've worked with some people who have been great role models of that. And others who really haven't got the message. But for me, that's a critical part of being a Christian in business.
Interesting, isn't it? So the company Service Master, which you may be familiar with, American company, and it just absolutely mushroomed in growth. And basic cleaning company. So it's outsourced cleaning company. And the key thing for them for the first 40 years, when it was an amazingly successful company, was actually this focus on the honor and dignity of the person and the honor and value and dignity of the work that they were doing. And any executive that joined that company had to spend 6 weeks cleaning. And it was really interesting that what they learned. I remember talking to the CEO. He said, what you learn is that you're invisible, and you're just not there. People completely, they kind of ignore you. You don't exist, and your job is menial, however well you do it. And he wanted everybody in his management team to feel it and to know that, and then to take that into their management.
And aside from the Christian witness, commercially, it's very important. I mean, I early on in my career as a CEO, I visited the Unipart facility in Oxford. So Unipart's run by John Neal. He's a great industrial visionary. And I went for a walk around the factory, and it was very impressive. Japanese lean manufacturing, years ahead of most of the stuff that I'd seen. But the thing that really impressed me was I talked to a guy who was pushing some bolts around, filling up the Kanban system, as they were called. And I was just chatting away to him, and he was able to articulate the Unipart vision and what his part was. And I thought, that is amazing. I'm going to aspire to that when I go out and have to lead my businesses.
I know you've been talking a lot, but can I ask you another question right now?
I don't mind.
When you listen to somebody like Micah talking about his capacity and desire if you like, to put himself in his boss's shoes. You know, that's in a sense quite something in a way. You know, I'm thinking about this other person, I'm thinking about their interests, I'm thinking about what's going on in their life. I don't know everything. There's a level of compassion kind of. Is there any advice that you would give, you know, a budding restructuralist, if that's the right word?
I think actually,
managing up.
yeah, I think, Micah, you've already made the main point, which is you've got to engage in dialogue. Doing a mind read and thinking, oh, this person doesn't like me, or you know, they're being unfair, or whatever, that will only lead to negative feelings. If you've got a problem with somebody, or they've got a problem with you, the best thing is to sit down and talk about it. And in my experience, 9 times out of 10, it isn't really a problem. It's exactly what you were saying. It was, you know, they're having a difficult time in their personal life. And I'm sure, as I look back at my time as CEO, there have been times of what I would describe of crisis where I don't think I was necessarily the most patient and listening individual, because you're thinking, you know, I've got all this stuff on my plate. How am I going to deal with it? So I just carry on with the talking it through.
Any comments on that?
No, I think it makes a lot of sense. Is it, I guess, on when you are in that sort of period of crisis, is it quite difficult if someone does say we need to talk, to sort of think, oh, I'm really busy, this isn't quite the priority here?
I'd say I've got better over the years with experience at either saying, yeah, by all means, let's go and talk, because sometimes it can be useful to take a bit of a break, or I'm not going to talk to you right now because I haven't got time, but let's sit down at 6 o'clock, or let's go and have a coffee at lunchtime. So I think I probably wasn't as good at that at the start of my career, but I hope I've learned.
And is it, I guess sometimes you're going to have a conversation where you just say, like, this isn't quite working and we're not on the same page. I guess that's going to be quite difficult, but how do you sort of go about doing that?
Yeah, having those sort of conversations is some of the most difficult stuff you do as a CEO. It depends really what the context is. If it's a performance management conversation, so you think somebody's got the talent and the skills, but they're not really performing, that's one thing. You look at that as a developmental conversation. If it's somebody who really doesn't get the picture or doesn't share the values of the team, then it's much more difficult. But the only way to do it is to be straight, and as Mark just referred to in the end, to treat people with respect. I mean, in each of the jobs that I've done so far, I've had to reformat the executive board, for example. So cut down the size, change people's roles, and sadly, in a lot of cases, change people. Because the one thing that's absolutely key, in any senior leadership team, you need a mixture of skills, but what you can't mix are values. You've got to have people who buy into the fundamental vision of what you're trying to do and are prepared to act with honesty and integrity. Because it's no good me building trust if somebody in the next office is flitting it away. So, and being able to judge that character of individuals, that's a really key skill. And so, sometimes, you know, your first impressions can be completely wrong. So you have to be careful. But again, it's a question of experience. Over the years, you get to tell, you know, people that you can trust, people who really are only interested in it for themselves, people playing the political game, etc.
Got another question as well.
Got another question?
I do.
Go.
Them.
Go on.
I mean, on the subject of having like difficult conversations and being straightforward and honest, often I think we kind of exist on the margins, right, where a decision can have a really sort of fundamental effect on a business, and we all, as humans, make mistakes. How do we communicate if we have made a mistake, or it doesn't even have to necessarily be a mistake of our own sort of competency that the market's changed or something's happened and what you were trying to do before hasn't quite been realized. And therefore you have to make adjustments off the basis of that. How do you have those conversations?
For me, I've never had a problem apologising. If I think I've got something wrong, I would happily say that. If we as a business have got something wrong, and there's one particular instance which sticks in my mind, where my technical director miscalculated on a particular piece of engineering, and this was on a $5 billion project, of which our share was only about $15 million, but if we got it wrong, the whole thing didn't work. And what he tried to do, the technical director, was go and tell them that it was going to work anyway. So in the end, I had to fly to Monaco. Okay, no hardship.
Yeah.
And go
F1 weekend. No doubt.
No. I'm not a petrol head. And go and explain to them that we've got the calculations wrong. This was a really serious situation. Could we work together to sort it out? Now, after the initial couple of hours of absolute anger, which I didn't blame them for, they then quietened down. We had a very constructive conversation, and we did get to a good solution that worked. And the oil platform is still working today, 10 years on.
Fantastic.
I have no further submissions.
You have no further submissions.
No.
So you're welcome. There's still a bit more time before we press the buzzer. I'm now going to ask him the question I asked you a little while ago, which is, John, so lots of things have happened, and obviously over the years, but any particular answers to prayer, if you like, directly? You're praying all the time, God is shaping you and so on, and Ruth, your wife, has been tremendously supportive, and you've mentioned those things, but any moments when you think, the Lord God Almighty is intervening here?
Yes, I would say on a number of occasions, but two specific things that I can think of. And I would say it's really a sense of peace amongst either a very difficult decision or a very difficult situation. So one time I was dealing with some equipment that had been impounded in a port in Shanghai, actually. In China, we were looking to set up a new factory just outside Shanghai, and it was obvious that the port authorities were looking for a bribe. It was in the early days of business expansion in China. And we had a board meeting about what to do, and my then chairman suggested we paid the bribe. And without thinking, I just slammed my hand on the table and said, no, we don't do that. But then going away afterwards, I was pretty worried. Partly because I thought, okay, I'm very strong on business ethics, but is the rest of the team with me? Which actually they were, as it turned out. But also, I felt that I'd messed up my career as the chairman. Now, actually, the chairman ended up leaving in an ignominious fashion, and I came up with a plan that just involved explaining to the mayor of the local town where we were building our factory that, if he didn't release our equipment, he wouldn't get the jobs or the tax revenues that he was planning on, or the investment, and how was he going to explain that to his party bosses? And funnily enough, the equipment was there the next day.
Yes, very good.
I mean, the other occasion I can think of was a really, really difficult situation that I faced, where really there were several crises all at once. There was a fraud that we thought was relatively small, but turned out to be a major fraud. At the same time, we had this issue that I was referring to where the technical director had lied, basically, as well as we had a major issue on another project. And our parent company were not at all happy, as you might imagine. So I can remember going home and talking to Ruth, my wife, and saying, I don't know what to do here. And actually there, praying about it and God intervening to provide a real sense of peace and calm, and also, a plan just to say, right, well, this is how we need to do it. We'll do this for this, that for that. We won't deal with that at the minute because we can't. We'll deal with it next week. And just coming up with a clear plan, but within the sense of serene peace. I'd say that's where I've seen God at work the most directly.
Peace in the storm. In a sense, the peace that passes understanding. The Lord is near. You bring your requests to him with a thankful heart. And wonderful. So, question for you. When you think about the Bible, or people in the Bible, or books of the Bible, or events in the Bible, plenty of scope here. What's been significant for you, for your working life? Have there been any people or verses that have been shaping you or helping you as you've?
I think it is. I mentioned that Romans 12:2 verse, and I think it is that transformation of the mind, and from that point, figuring things out. I just often fall into the trap of thinking that things are very clear, but actually realizing that if it were to be clear, I wouldn't need God, and the complexity of certain things means that I need to rely on God more, not less.
Right.
So I think that's been a really big thing, that there's, I guess you always think that when you go into business, there's going to be a time when someone says, we need you to, I don't know, steal this money, or we need you to sort of sneak something through. And that does often happen, but a lot of the time it's a little bit more insidious than that. And you have decisions that you need to make, which may not quite seem on the surface to be unethical, and you got to have the discernment and the wisdom, and ultimately you need to be praying and understanding that, which is really important.
Be transformed by the renewal of your mind.
Yes.
Yeah.
Romans, can't go wrong with Romans, can you? Probably the rest of the Bible either, by the way. Other books of the Bible are available. John, how about you? Any verses that are significant to you? Or?
Yeah. So, two things I would say. I mean, firstly, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, and you can work out how you translate it. But I mean, basically, trust in the Lord your God with all your heart, and don't lean on your own understanding. In all your ways, listen to him, and he will make your path straight. And I think, just echoing what you were saying, Micah, in every decision, as a Christian in business, I've always tried to do the right thing. And really with those verses at the back of my mind, and a lot of the time at the front. And I don't think that I've ever suffered, actually, from always trying to do the right thing, even though in the short term it might appear more attractive to take an easier route. The other thing I would say is, the more I've learned about the person of Jesus and who he actually was, how he treated people with grace, how he turned the world upside down, how he modelled a new way of being human, I thought, I'd like some of that, basically. And really wanting, as I've said a couple of times before, to try and model a different way, a new way of being human, however poorly and imperfectly, trying to model on Jesus' different way.
Amen. Thank you for that. And thank you very much indeed, both of you, for really stimulating conversation and for much wisdom and insight, which hopefully will appear in Thank God It's Wednesday soon. But you're going to give you some gifts in a moment. But first of all, you have to go through the pain of a 9-question quiz. So I think I'm going to come to you first on this one, Micah. These are not complicated. So sweet or sour?
Sweet.
Spiced chickpea cauliflower tagine.
Yeah,
or steak.
I had that. I mean, I'm pretty much a vegetarian now, so I have to go for the former.
You have to go for the former. Yeah. Very good. Gospel of Mark, Gospel of John?
John.
Moses or David?
David.
David. Basketball or rugby?
Oh, definitely basketball, yeah.
Oh.
Coaches basketball, looking for talented people for the Maidstone Warriors, I think. Films or novels?
Let's go for films.
Okay, here's a really difficult one. Lewis Capaldi or Kendrick Lamar?
Kendrick Lamar.
Okay. One book you've really enjoyed this year. Doesn't have to be a Christian book, just a book you've enjoyed this year.
Gosh, probably Fooled by Randomness by Nicholas Nassim Taleb.
Can you say that more loudly for me?
Fooled by Randomness.
Fooled by Randomness.
Yes.
By Taleb, yes. And one thing you really like about Jesus?
Like gentleness, I think. I
Gentleness.
could go into more, but I think gentleness, being able, so strong and supreme, yet the ability to meet us where we're at.
Wonderful. Thank you. John, sweet or sour?
Sour.
Diet Coke or Chateau Mouton Rothschild 2016?
Chateau Mouton Rothschild.
Mark or John?
Mark.
Esther or Ruth? Book of?
Ruth.
Has to be. Your
Yeah.
wife's name is Ruth. You've got to get that one right. France or Italy?
Italy.
Films or novels?
Both.
Oof, don't get that option. You've got to choose. You gotta choose.
Novels.
Novels, okay. Daniel Craig or Sean Connery?
Daniel Craig.
Oh. One book you've really enjoyed this year. Doesn't have to be a Christian book again.
Well, there were a series of 3 books on Damien Seeker, the Seeker series, historical fiction by S.G. MacLean.
Oh, historical fiction. Of course, you are a historian.
Indeed.
And one thing you really like about Jesus, it can be the same thing you said before, but
Yeah, I think piercing insight.
piercing insight. Praise God. Fantastic. Well, thank you very much to our 2 guests who've reminded
Thank
us
you.
of how God does indeed walk through us all through our careers and at the beginning of our careers as well. Thank you for your wisdom, insight, and your openness and vulnerability, transparency. I wonder how the Lord has been with you, and whether, as you reflect on what we've heard today, you might think about reflecting on how God has been with you and how you might want to share that with other people to encourage them, how you might want to be indeed more emotionally open with Him and with others. And if you have some stories to tell about how God has acted, it's so encouraging for our brothers and sisters to hear them. And of course, we at LICC, we love to hear those stories. So feel free to pop them on the comments at the end or get in touch with us. And if you're looking for some stuff on work, whole life discipleship, scuttle over to the LICC website, www.licc.org.uk. There is oodles of good stuff, Now your presents, and then I'm going to. So here we have, because this is the Thank God It's Monday podcast. Guess what you get? You get.
Oh, that was the book I was actually thinking of. Yeah.
That was the book you were actually thinking of. How sweet of you to say that.
Thank you.
This is unsigned, undedicated, so you can give it to somebody else or sell it on eBay. And similarly for you, this is
Thank
the very
you.
latest
Thank you.
edition, number 5.
I wasn't thinking of it.
No, you weren't thinking of it. Honesty, you see, honesty. There you go. Even old friends, they betray you. They betray you. And because this is LICC, there is always chocolate.
Thank you.
And these are, well, other brands are available, but these red orbs of sweetness are there to remind us all.
John doesn't like sour though.
There you go.
Or
Red
sweet,
orbs.
sorry.
To remind us, like the red dots in the LICC logo, that what a high and great privilege it is to serve the Lord wherever He places us.
Amen.
Amen to that. So, as we close, if you are in need of wisdom this day, may the Lord give you wisdom from above that is pure and sweet. If you're in need of strength and perseverance, may He, the one who sent His Spirit, the Spirit that raised the Lord Jesus Christ from the dead, may that Spirit strengthen and empower you this day and in the coming days. And if you're in need of peace, the Lord is near. May He grant you that peace that we've heard about, that passes understanding, and that comes from the Prince of Peace, our King, who gave His life for you and walks with you moment by moment, hour by hour, in all that you do. Maybe so. Thanks for listening.